If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
My next guest is economist Paul Craig Roberts. Now, Paul has served as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy in the Reagan Administrations. He was also the co-founder of Reaganomics, which refers to the economic policies promoted by US President Ronald Reagan. Alongside economics, Paul is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and has written 8 books, including his latest book, How the Economy Was Lost, The War of the Worlds. He joins me now via video link from Florida. Paul Craig Roberts, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Now, tell me, Paul, why do you believe that the US is a crumbling economy?
Well, the economy has been moved offshore, Kevin, for the last 15, maybe even 20 years. Corporations seeking higher short-term profits have moved so many manufacturing jobs, professional service jobs such as software engineering, information technology, research, design, the kinds of jobs that American university graduates used to take. These have been moved out to China, to India, to Indonesia, to Taiwan, South Korea, Eastern Europe. And when you move the jobs out, you take with it the consumer income, the tax base, the gross domestic product, the supply chains associated with industry, and you leave only a part of the economy. And we only have part of an economy here now.
So, is there any sort of end game to the economy getting better in the US? And especially what happens over there, does ripple over here as well?
No, it can't get better. You see, the reason we have such a high unemployment rate and the reason the unemployment number does not respond to traditional post-World War II monetary and fiscal policies is that there are no jobs to call unemployed workers back to. The jobs have been moved offshore, leaving the workers. So if you have a traditional stimulus program, either easy money or large budget deficits, and we've had both now for a number of years. We've had the largest budget deficits in our history, the easiest, longest sustained monetary policy with interest rates near zero, and it's had no impact on the economy. There's no recovery. We just had the jobs report today. No jobs, no new jobs at all. So you can't recover when you simply deindustrialize your own economy. And when you take middle-class jobs, which were ladders of upward mobility, and you simply put them offshore in order to maximize the short-term profits of industry. This is a fundamental problem, and it's not recognized because economists associate jobs offshoring with free trade, and they think free trade is beneficial.
Yeah. No, sure. Go ahead.
Well, of course, jobs offshoring has nothing whatsoever to do with free trade or any kind of trade. It's not trade at all. Nothing is being traded. You're simply having labor arbitrage, the pursuit of lowest factor costs. And that, of course, contradicts the basic requirement for free trade laid out by David Ricardo. So I think the economists simply are bought off. The name economists, they get speaking fees, consulting fees, They get put on boards, and so they go along with what is serving the short-term interests of the corporations. But you see, Kevin, what the effect is, it destroys the domestic market. The domestic consumer market, the powerful American consumer market, it's simply being destroyed. And this is the longest recession. And if you want to know the truth, Kevin, if the government actually reported the inflation numbers correctly, there's been negative growth for the last 6 or 7 years.
So you do believe that the figures aren't, are shined up basically to look better than they are?
Yes. Part of it was the effort to reduce the cost of living adjustments to Social Security retirees. And so they got rid of the right way of measuring consumer inflation, and they substituted what they call the substitution effect. So now they assume that if the price of something goes up, consumers move away from that into a different product. So if the price of a choice cut of steak goes up, they assume consumers move to a lower cut, a less good cut. And of course, consumers do that. But once you make that change, you're no longer measuring a constant standard of living.
Yes, but surely, things sometimes, obviously, we've been in recession before. Things can get better, things can get worse. What's so different about this?
Well, what's so different about this is that in prior recessions, generally they were caused by the central bank raising interest rates to cool off inflationary pressures. And as they raised interest rates, this would result in the economy slowing down, inventories building up, layoffs, unemployment would rise, the economy would cool down. And then the central bank would turn around and say, oh, well, now we have to fight the unemployment rate, and they would loosen up the monetary policy, and the interest rates would go down, and the workers who were laid off would be called back to work because the jobs were still there. Today, and for the last 15 years or so, the jobs have been increasingly moved offshore. So there are no jobs there to call the workers back to. That's why we have a 22.5% unemployment rate. But when they tell you 9%, they have a very narrow definition of the workforce. It only includes people who are currently looking for a job. Now, if you've been looking for a job for a couple of years and you can't find one, and you cease looking and you become discouraged, you're simply dropped out of the labor force and they don't count you as unemployed. That's another trick, you see. It's not an accurate measure of unemployment.
Yes, but surely then, okay, are you saying this is by design then, that the whole middle class, in a sense, and the jobs have been shipped abroad by design?
I don't know that it's by design. I think it's just short-term greed. The corporations, see, once the Soviet Union collapsed, Kevin, the massive labor forces, unutilized labor forces of China and India became available to first world corporations. And pressure was put on them by Wall Street, by large retailers such as Walmart, and by takeover artists to take advantage of this cheaper labor in order to maximize profits. And so they began moving their operations offshore. The labor costs would drop dramatically, the profits would rise, Wall Street would be happy, shareholders would be happy, and the executives could pay themselves enormous performance bonuses. You see, the performance bonus today of an American CEO is many times his salary.
Yeah.
So this is how it happened. It happened, everyone, in other words, it benefits the individual corporation and the individual shareholders of that corporation. But the net overall effect is to destroy the consumer market, to destroy the ability of income growth in the United States, to disassociate consumers from the incomes associated with the production of the goods and services that they consume. So that, in a way, we're becoming like a colony.
But there's only so much you can strip people of their monies and their wealth, and there's only so much you can sort of dumb people down, isn't there? Until people still start reacting through rioting. For over here, for example, some of the rioting was blamed on the economic crisis. I mean, surely this could hit the U.S. as well.
Yes, it eventually it will, as the unemployment rate continues to rise and people get more and more hopeless. Gerald Celente says, when people have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And the riots that you were having in the London area, even out into Kent, out into Bromley.
That's right.
Many of these were people who have never had a job because there aren't any jobs.
So what's the answer then?
Well, you would have to recognize the problem, and so far the economics profession refuses to recognize it. You could correct it simply by changing the way you tax corporations. If you tax them according to the location at which they added value to their product, In other words, if value is added to their product domestically with domestic labor,
Yeah.
they would have a low tax rate. If it's added in China, they'd have a high tax rate. And in that way, you could neutralize the labor cost difference.
Well, do you think part of the problem as well is that, Barack is sort of, still guided by the policies of Bush still?
Well, yes, there's no real difference as far as I can tell in domestic or foreign or military or police state policies between Bush, Cheney, and Obama. But that's because the country is ruled by an oligarchy. We have powerful Wall Street interests, powerful military security complex. These are the two most powerful interest groups in the country, and they primarily control the government. They share power on the margin with the oil companies, the pharmaceuticals, agribusiness. But those groups write the laws that Congress passes and the president signs. And the notion that there's a democracy here is a facade. There's an oligarchy. And the president has very little power compared to these powerful interests because the money from these interest groups is what finances the political campaigns.
But then let me ask you, why is this an international problem then?
Why isn't it, or is it?
Why is it?
You mean the economy?
Yes.
Well, because it's an international problem for first world countries. Because any first world country, the corporation is under pressure from stock analysts to increase profits, and the easiest way to do that is to produce your goods with cheap labor elsewhere. It's not happening to developing countries. It's happening to the first world. There's a great deal of offshoring has occurred in England, though nowhere as badly as in the United States. I mean, we have major cities that used to have, say, 1 million population. They've shrunk down to 300,000. Entire parts of them are derelict. It looks like World War II has gone through there. It's amazing the devastation of former well-to-do cities, large areas in the United States known for their manufacturing, for their strong middle class. These places have been hit very hard. Some of them are essentially gone. Detroit, Michigan wants to shrink itself by 40 square miles because of just derelict homes and vacant blocks after blocks.
Well, Paul Craig Roberts, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleased to be with you, Kevin.
Stay tuned, and I'll be right back after this break.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.